Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. And I'd like to, in this video, read you an article that I found interesting, if not somewhat problematic. There were things I liked about it, things I didn't like about it, and I will read it to you now, and I hope you enjoy it for what it is. This is from a website called unheard.com. And it is titled, Why the Greens Should Stop Playing God. And by the author of this article is John Gray. Realistic thinking about the state of the planet is almost extinct. The state of the planet is forcing itself into the center of the human mind. For increasing numbers of people, climate change is a palpable fact. Island communities and coastal cities are suffering the effects of rising sea levels, and all of us experience extreme weather and disjointed seasons. Center ground politicians have accepted that some kind of action, more radical than any that has been implemented so far, has become urgently necessary. Everyone but the most stubborn climate denialists realizes that an unprecedented change is taking place in the world that humans have inhabited throughout their history. At the same time, as T.S. Eliot wrote in 4 quartets, humankind cannot bear very much reality, and thinking on the subject is increasingly delusional. A byproduct of worldwide industrialization based on fossil fuels, the shift that is underway was set in motion by human beings. It does not follow, however, that humans can stop it. As climate scientists have pointed out, global warming will continue for hundreds or thousands of years after its proximate causes have been removed. The demands made by Extinction Rebellion net zero carbon emissions for the UK by 2025, for example, are impossibly draconian. But even if they could be enforced, they would make little impact on greenhouse gases worldwide or prevent the climate disruption that is already baked into the system. Green movements at the present time are expressions of magical thinking, attempts to ignore and escape reality rather than understand and adapt to it. So this is actually, I take issue with this paragraph because that's actually false. Extinction Rebellion is very aware of the fact that we're screwed. They're very aware that there is global warming baked into the system. They're very aware that this is throwing rocks against a huge castle wall. They're aware of all of that. The thing that Extinction Rebellion does is they're just taking action in the face of this reality, of the face of the news, in the face of the existence of the 6th mass extinction, where we're going, where we're heading very quickly. They're taking action, futile or not. So I don't know, whatever. I'm going to continue reading this article, but I'm just going to say that paragraph. It would be really awesome if people actually watched some Extinction Rebellion videos before they write articles about Extinction Rebellion, or actually listen to Roger Hallam, listen to the people talking about what's going on. They know we're screwed. They're still doing it anyways. That's the point. It's right action not tied to the outcome. That's what they're doing. One of the realities green thinking passes over is geopolitics. Consider the fashionable idea that the world, or at least the capitalist West, should stop burning fossil fuels. From an environmental point of view, this may be highly desirable, even though it will not arrest disruptive climate change. In geopolitical terms, it is a recipe for global upheaval. Some of the world's most pivotal states depend on fossil fuels for their existence. Saudi Arabia would collapse without revenues the kingdom receives from the oil market. Iran and Russia rely on high oil prices for much of their national income. And for all these countries, abruptly ending the consumption of fossil fuels would mean a massive drop in living standards and large-scale political disruption. All the better. Greens may say these are hardly desirable regimes. So again, this is a problematic paragraph because, look, if we stop burning fossil fuels, pretty much everything's going to collapse. The economy is going to collapse. The world economy is going to collapse. Industrial civilization will collapse. And that's probably going to be catastrophic. But I think that as people start moving forward with, action or plans or whatever, going back to my concept of compassionate degrowth, right? You You understand that you have to stop burning fossil fuels. You understand that there are consequences of doing that, and you try to minimize the consequences of doing that as much as you can, while still actually doing it. But there are going to be consequences. It's going to be painful. It's going to hurt. So you have to tell people, look, this is going to hurt, but here we go. Because, not doing anything is going to hurt. Doing something is going to hurt. So what, would you rather have a managed retreat? But it would be folly to assume that what emerged would be any better. The Saudi kingdom would fragment or be replaced by a more radical Islamist regime, and impoverished Russia could well be more belligerent and adventurous in its foreign and defense policies. With Iran starved of income from fossil fuels and no prospect of revenues being resumed, any prospect of democratic transformation in the country would diminish, not increase. Regime change induced by green policies is no more likely to work than regime change imposed by military force. And then the author is sounding a lot like, Republicans or centrist Democrats who say when you propose, healthcare for all, they're, how are we going to pay for it? They just bring up really just stupid arguments. This is a dumb argument. Anyways, whatever. I'm going to pick this article apart, I guess. Another reality disregarded in green thinking is 20th century history. Climate protests such as Extinction Rebellion are spin-offs from the anti-globalization movement of a decade or so. Are they? Is it really? How so? It's not a spin-off. It's a climate change protest. It's not an anti-globalization movement spin-off. And like them, they believe contemporary Western capitalism is dysfunctional and headed for history's scrap heap. That is very true, my friend. In this, they are right. A global free market was always a fanciful project, and the rickety structure of debt-financed asset prices and escalating trade rivalries is fragile. Another credit crunch on the scale of that in 2007-8 would most likely destroy it. That does not mean a socialist economy will do any better in protecting the environment. So, again, this is just the dumbest argument. The worst ecological catastrophes of the last century occurred in the former Soviet Union and Maoist. So you're equating democratic socialism or socialism with totalitarian communism, which they don't have any. There are other examples of communism and socialism that are actually quite functional, like Sweden or like Cuba. There are examples of things that actually work. Venezuela, before we started sanctioning them and destroying their economy so that we could point and look and see, oh, what a terrible economy they have. They were actually doing wonderful things for their people, even though all their money was coming from oil, but that's beside the point. Where am I? If I don't shut up, I'm going to have a hard time reading this article quickly. So anyways, under the influence of Marxian ideology in which the natural world must be humanized, the natural world was damaged and degraded more than any Western country. So this has happened a long time ago. They had no idea about climate change, and they didn't actually care about destroying the environment. So you're talking about socialism with the awareness of climate change versus totalitarian communism, and they didn't give a shit about the environment. So whatever. Among the assaults on the environment was one of the fastest decimations of other animal species in history. 50 years ago, around 180,000 whales disappeared from the waters around the Soviet Union in an extraordinary environmental rampage that was covered up at the time, and for decades later, the Soviet whaling industry killed off the mammals simply in order to meet production targets required by the 5-year plan. Again, this has nothing to do with our current situation and current understanding of the world. Barely 30% of the whales that were slaughtered were put to any economic use. I'm not going to read the rest of this because this doesn't matter. Of course, Greens will tell you that they want an economic system different from a state socialist command economy. And they do. But how this new system would work has never been made clear, and in practice their demands amount to little more than what they call sustainable development. That is true, and that's problematic. The trouble is that Green's proposals involve a drop in material living standards for large numbers of people, and that must happen. And any such fall will be unsustainable in political terms, and that is actually quite true. Macron's tax on petrol fueled the rise of the Gilets jaunes in France, while the principal beneficiary of Hillary Clinton's election pledge to shut down the coal industry has been Donald Trump. When green policies impose, I wasn't necessarily Hillary Clinton. That was also, Obama was trying to shut down coal plants too. That was just an extension of Obama's plan. When green policies impose heavy costs on the poor and the working majority, as they often do, the result is popular blowback. That's still not a reason not to try, you joke. I'm really kind of disgusted by this author. The second time through, I realized what little sense this guy makes. In theoretical terms, the solution to the environmental crisis is what John Stuart Mill, in his prescient Principles of Political Economy, called a stationary state economy, one in which technical progress is not used to expand production and consumption, but to increase leisure and the quality of life. The trouble is that a zero-growth economy is politically impossible, not unless you educate the masses with the media. If you use the media to educate people instead of brainwash them, then that would be totally different. Populist backlash and geopolitical upheaval will derail any transition to a stationary state. Lying behind these obstacles is another reality that has been excluded from current thinking. Despite much talk about declining fertility in many countries, human population growth continues to be the root cause of the mass extinction that is in progress. Species are vanishing on a vast scale because their habitats are disappearing, and the chief reason for this is human expansion. It may be true that population growth will level off later this century, somewhere around 9 or 10 billion. We won't get there, so sorry. By that point, however, the biosphere will have been gutted. If human numbers then fall, it will be in a world that has been hideously impoverished. Interestingly, Mill foresaw this prospect when he envisioned the stationary state in the book. There is not much satisfaction, he wrote, in contemplating the world with nothing left to the spontaneous activity of nature, with every rood of land brought into cultivation which is capable of growing food for human beings, every flowery waste or natural pasture plowed up, all the quadrupeds or birds not domesticated for man's use exterminated as his rivals for food, every hedgerow or superfluous tree rooted out, and scarcely a place left where a wild shrub or flower could grow without being eradicated as a weed in the name of improved agriculture. If the earth must lose that great portion of its pleasantness which it owes to things that the unlimited increase of wealth and population must extirpate from it, for the mere purpose of a larger but not a better or happier population, I sincerely hope, for the sake of posterity, that they will be content to be stationary long before necessity compels them to it. Over 170 years later, there is no prospect of anyone being content to be stationary. Nothing in the current climate of ideas is as unpopular as Mill's neo-Malthusianism. True, he linked it with female emancipation, even spending a night in prison for the crime of distributing pamphlets on birth control to the working-class women. But for liberals today, that hardly excuses what they condemn as Mill's dark misanthropy, in preferring a world with a small population and large tracts of wilderness over one choked and desolated by billions of struggling human beings. Do they condemn it as dark misanthropy? Is that what they do? I don't know. But that sounds beautiful, right? Small population and large tracts of wilderness. That's the direction we want to go. Not every sperm is sacred. Every sperm is great. You guys know that tune. It is at this point that the extinction crisis looms into view. The industrial economy will not accept limits on growth because the civilization it serves has rejected any constraints of what it can achieve. The fact that an objective is impossible to realize is, according to current attitudes, no reason not to attempt it. Quite the opposite, in fact. Impossible dreams, so we are told by countless secular sermonizers, are what makes humans unique and special. In this modern religion, accepting any final limits on human power is the worst sin. As a corollary, magical thinking, which rests on a belief in the omnipotence of the human will, is obligatory. So this is the part that I liked about this article, because that is spot on. Because, the constant message we get is, you can do anything you want to if you just imagine it or just will it into being with your mind and just manifest it, and you know what I'm saying? You could do it. Surviving the climate crisis is not an inherently unrealizable goal. What it requires is not sustainable development, but something more like what James Lovelock in his book, A Rough Ride to the Future, has called sustainable retreat, or is that compassionate degrowth? I don't know. Using the most advanced technologies, hold on a second, including nuclear as well as solar energy, and abandoning farming in favor of synthetic means of food production, the still growing human population could be fed without making further intolerable demands on the planet. I don't know about synthetic means of food production. I have no idea about that at all and what that does to the human body. I mean, that sounds like, hey, let's just experiment even more with our DNA and with the environment and whatever. High-intensity urban living could enable rewilding of land that has been vacated. Resources would be focused on building defenses against the shift in climate that will occur, whatever now humans do. Hubristic dreams of saving the planet would be replaced by thinking how to adapt to living with a planet that humans have destabilized. If humans do not adjust, the planet will reduce them to smaller numbers or consign them to extinction. So there you go. Make a choice or have the choice be made for you. A program of this kind is the opposite of what is proposed by Greens. It is also profoundly uncongenial to the prevailing culture. A consequence of the decline of religion is a parallel decline, and the idea that the natural world imposes any limits on human will. Rather than humans being seen as one animal among many, the dominant species at the present time, but like all others in having no secure tenure on the earth. The dominant species at the present time, but like all others in having no secure tenure on the earth, they have been encouraged to see themselves as having the power over nature of the God in which they no longer believe. Ooh, that's true. And that is an ugly truth. If God did not make the world, humankind can and should remake it in its own image. That is the basis on which our supposedly secular civilization stands. And it is also the ultimate source of the extinction crisis. Excellent point. So this is where he gets into like, he hits some solid truths in here. In these circumstances, any program based on the fact that humans face unstoppable climate change will be condemned as despairing fatalism. Y'all ever feel that yourself? I do. For a civilization that prides itself on its devotion to science, this is a curious attitude. Science aims to formulate universal laws that are independent of human beliefs and values. Enter the post-truth world. If these laws deflate our hopes and ambitions, so be it. If the point of the exercise is objective truth, subjective emotions must be set aside. So must faith, religious or otherwise. If we are to believe its ideologues, science is an inquiry into the natural world of which the human animal is an integral part. In fact, science has become a channel for the belief inherited from monotheism that humankind can transcend the natural world. The paradox of today's green movements is that they promote this anthropocentric religion. The extinction crisis can be mitigated only by turning our minds to deal with reality, but realistic thinking is almost extinct. And that, my friends, is that. So it's an interesting article. There were some very, very good points he made. But the last paragraph, again, just falls into ridiculousness because not all the green movements and not everybody in the green movement promotes an anthropocentric, like, we're going to conquer this climate change and we're going to live better than that's not how they think and that's not how they feel. It just seems a little unconnected from what the green, has this person even actually talked to any Greens or Extinction Rebellion people? I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of assumption going on in this article, but otherwise there are some really good points. That being said, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.